Welcome back. My second guest in today's program is Sultan Ali Haider. He's an expert of political economy and speaks on various subjects of international relations and international economics. Sultan, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Shabahat.
Sultan, we are today discussing the rivalry between the United States and China. That's not stopping, it's developing with each passing day. And we are also considering economy to be one of the major factors behind this diplomatic rivalry. What is your take on that?
Okay, thank you, Shabahat, first of all, for inviting me. In terms of the rivalry, it's, first of all, it depends on how you define the interest, right? Recently, in the US international relations space, how they have started defining rivalry is also the economic size. Because one of the biggest reasons why US has been the dominating force globally, and that's why it has been leading in technology, in terms of military, everything, it has been the size of its economy. And because it was dominating. The problem emanating is that China has been on the rise, it continues to be on the rise, and it has been doing phenomenal GDP growth despite its size. And it is supposed to overtake the American economy. So when that news started coming up in terms of analysts that in 20 years, 30 years, China will overtake the US economy. So that was in early 2000s. So that is when US planners started to see China as a threat in terms of their dominance. So that is at the heart of the problem.
That is at the heart of the problem. But what do you think? There are few people who believe, and I have read that in a number of articles, that the United States dollar, the USD, has got some threats from RMB because China is now the country that is the largest exporter of the world, and it has a right to trade in its own currency. The same offers have been given to the countries that are under sanctions. That includes Iran and Syria. So what is your take on this currency to currency war between the two countries?
So in terms of currency war, I think, okay, in 1970, 71, that is where the gold peg to currency stopped, and that's why US moved to pure currency, and that where all the other central banks of the world also moved to. So now it's pure perception game, right? Now the way US controls the global economy is all trade happens in US dollars. Oil the US enforces happens in dollars. Any dollar transaction gets routed through New York. So that's where they control, that's why they're able to impose sanctions. Due to that dominance, if you see US trade deficit has been growing and growing, right? Despite that, I mean, Pakistan, we look at trade deficits as minuscule trade deficits. Still, Pakistan's currency is under pressure, it's taking a nosedive. And then it stabilizes, then it comes up, then it goes down. In terms of US, it stays the same, despite those hundreds of billions of trade deficits. It is because of that control. Now, China is workshop of the world. Now, if every country that is trading with China, it starts trading in Chinese currency, then it will not be routing those dollars, right? So demand for dollars will go down. Dollars will start to depreciate vis-a-vis other currencies. So that has huge implications in multiple directions. And that is again, which is really threatening US's dominance.
But despite what you just said,
yeah,
we have not seen China using or playing the economic cards so far. And nonetheless, it was in 2018 when Donald Trump started putting sanctions against some Chinese companies, and the trajectory has continued in the wake of the current government as well. So are these economic interests actually interwoven? Does China also have a downside when it comes to the economy and taking on United States economically?
No, of course, because China is better at this game, right? So right now, China is improving in terms of technology. So in terms of progress, China is doing really well, right? So China is becoming technologically advanced. Made in China is not a negative trademark as it used to be, right? So US is not winning that war in terms of technology and advancement and industrialization. So that is again what is threatening. Now, one interesting statistic is that China was supposed to overtake US economy in 2040. Now, due to COVID shrinkage in the US, COVID impact in the US, it was BBC report that in 2028, it's expected China will overtake the US economy. Now, that is something which really creates that gap. China doesn't need to do anything. China, because it's growing, right? So it just needs to play its game, just needs to grow. It will become the biggest economy, and all the perks will come along with that. US is under threat because US cannot win. Okay, one of my basic thesis is that United States is not trying to win this war in terms of pure economic competition, right? It is trying to use other means to win that war. And in terms of the timeline, in my analysis, the timeline is around 2010 when Obama administration did the Asian pivot, right? So they said we will disengage from the Middle East and we want to focus on the Pacific, because that is the first time when they started to see China as a threat. Lastly, even if you look at CPEC, bringing it home to Pakistan, Pakistan was always asked that Pakistan is focused on other stuff and it should focus on trade and economy, right? Everyone was trying to associate Pakistan with trade, with terrorism and things like that. But CPEC was pure trade and economy.
Trade and infrastructure.
Infrastructure, economy, everything,
trade.
right? Everything positive to it, right? So I remember Pakistan analysts were really shocked when they heard that India and US and all of those countries that used to say Pakistan is not focusing on its economies. Pakistanis are not focusing on economy and development, and they are extremists, right? So suddenly when we are doing this, the whole thing is around, if these countries develop economically, they can be strong enough to pose a threat.
Sultan, people also believe that there are some political economists that believe that since China has a policy of creating economic partnerships, both domestically and abroad, they're creating economic highways, they're creating economic interdependence with other countries. United States also finds it as a threat because US has a hegemonic military posture. The only way United States influence countries is through its military hardware and kinetic force. What do you think?
I think it's not just US's military infrastructure. It is also US has a control on World Bank and IMF, right? So the countries, all the countries, it's the capitalist model. So Western world, developed economies, all the developing economies have to connect to them, trade with them. So they're dependent on World Bank and IMF. And you have read Confessions of Economic Hitmen, and countries keep on going through this cycle. Now with China coming in and doing a trade, it is providing an alternative, right? So countries can sort of bargain for a better deal and they can get out of that loop. It's that promise of getting out of that loop. That economic pressure allows US to exert pressure on countries, on the governments for their dictates, right? So for example, they want Pakistan to change its flag's color, for example, right? They say we'll impose sanctions, right? Economic sanctions, they're not using any military, right? The impact of the economic sanctions goes away when China comes into play. So that is the biggest threat.
Like it happened in the case of Iran, that has signed a deal of $450 billion US with China to, to trade for its oil in Chinese currency, and Pakistan to provide the passage for it.
That's a perfect example. And China is so big in terms of trade, it can also do barter trade. China is workshop of the world. Iran, whatever it needs to import, most of the things, it can place an order to China and send oil and get goods in return, right? And at a deeper level, you have touched a very fine point here. It is the battle of the system, right? So it was capitalist system. So why US, everyone would want to emulate the US, right? Because it's the leader of the capitalist world, right? Now China was working on an alternative model. Now the most interesting thing is that China is becoming the flag bearer of economic growth and success, right? It has been. So many countries are now looking at what is the Chinese model. Back in the day, 20 years ago, when I studied political science, nobody would really want to study what's the Chinese model. It was seen as a gone case, right? So it would be, yes, communism, socialism in general, and capitalism. And what's the American and what's the Western democracy model? Now people are studying what's the single party model, how that economy is run.
So China is also leading by example and becoming an attraction point for many other countries.
So that is becoming an implication of this. Now that implication again is very seen as a huge threat by the United States.
Thank you very much, Sultan Ali Haider, for being my guest in today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join back with the last segment of the program. Stay with us.